It's the 9th of June, 2025. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report. Voice-to-skull technology caused the riots in Los Angeles, courtesy of our very own U.S. military in cooperation with the Trump team and the secret space program operatives. Here's how it was done. Their next target, Washington, D.C. As always, you get the full story here. Meetings after meetings this weekend between the Mormons, the Federal Reserve, and Treasury. Here's what they discussed. And ever wonder why the deep state used to get paid for wars and death? It's all about suicide versus massacre and how the souls could be used posthumous. And the universal secrets of artificial intelligence alchemy. How did it work? Well, it is the 9th of June. Feels like it should be the 29th or 59th day of June already, but it's not. So let's talk about what happened over the weekend. We've got a lot of things to discuss today. So I'm going to kind of just guess I'll get started. Okay, so let's talk about the meetings over the weekend. We know that last week there were a lot of meetings between the Mormons, Langley 5, Global Headquarters, and several other groups of people. We also know that they moved very quickly to isolate various people and question all of them. It was like the, let's call it the Mormon Inquisition, to try to figure out what's happening in this country. Those meetings continued on Saturday. This time it was more about the banks, the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, what's the real state of the union here, at least the financial state of the union, what's going on, what kind of orders are coming from the Team Trump and the Trumpettes. I call them, now I'm going to call the Duck Dynasty people the Trumpettes. Kind of like the Rockettes. They kick endlessly for no apparent reason and then expect something to be, different, except their legs aren't quite as beautiful as the Rockettes' legs are. I'm sure. Anyway, okay, so the GHQ, so there was a follow-up meeting which happened on Sunday. They said to give them 24 hours. So for those 24 hours, they went on a full-on hackorama. They did have, under the state of Kansas, what I call a Wayback Machine. And a Wayback Machine this is a form of space tech. It's not the, you go back and look on the internet kind of thing for old websites. This is a machine where you can actually go back in time and look at events of the past. And it was connected to something larger, which also no longer exists, along with the people that were there. But the Wayback Machine, they were using it apparently to go back. So if I were to mention, like I mentioned on the last report, how AIs work and different things that happened in the past, they would go back and try to look at that. They would try to look to see if they could get any kind of key codes, any kind of intelligence information on how energy sales work. You see, because I said on the last report that the sale of energy was the base route for the financial system. So like everything else, they're like, oh, we need financial system control. Let's get a hold of some energy and try to sell it. So if you felt a little bit tired off and on this weekend, a little off, a little weird, this is why, because they were trying to turn that machine up full force by Saturday afternoon, my time. Kind of started earlier in the morning, but really ramped up in the afternoon. So even this particular machine that used to only be utilized by the parents and Marduk and other, let's just say, non-humans and semi-humans, they really tried to give it a go. They pushed it to the limit to try to get as much energy as possible to sell, and the machine even shut them down. There was a governor on the machine that wouldn't allow for an abundance or over amount of energy to be taken. So things that you might have experienced related to this ridiculous event by a bunch of idiots was extreme hunger Oh my God, I'm so hungry. I feel like my blood sugar is low. I need some energy and I need it fast. I need some kind of food. That was some of the things that were being reported this weekend. Other things that were being reported later in the day, it almost felt like you were being pushed or entered into another dimension for a second there or something. It's not really a dizziness feeling. It almost feels like a push and a shove. So they definitely were making an effort trying to use a machine. And again, I have to be as polite as possible because otherwise producer Mike will cut this out anyway. But I have to say, there isn't a word in the English language to describe the amount of idiocracy that comes from this group of people, their lack of knowledge and wisdom when it comes to space technology or non-human technology that they might have had an eensy-weensy bit of access to in the past, causes me to have to babysit these idiots 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yes, friends at the deep state, I am your beeping 4-letter word babysitter. That's what I do. I babysit you people. Until I can get rid of every last iota of it on this planet, I am your babysitter. I am a guardian. I am ground command. I am an ambassador to the Universal Council. I am a lot of different things. I also know a lot about quantum AI and space technology that you know obviously nothing about. So until that time happens, which I hope happens really, really soon with this transition, but until then, I am your babysitter. You can expect me looking over your shoulder every moment of every single day. Now, back to the meetings. So they got all smart, at least they thought that they were smart, and they tried to pitch some elaborate plans to the Mormons in their final meetings yesterday. They made up some tapestry of, let's say, bull feces, and they made up an elaborate tapestry of this feces to the Mormons. They talked about we should have access to the Sun Network and the Gonkolator machine and the oogity boogity, AI from the planet, whatever, they've made up a total baloney story to these people. Did they buy it? No. Not at all. I certainly didn't buy it. I'm like, what the heck is that? What is a oogity boogity machine? I wonder what that is. Well, they felt the same way I did, it turns out. But it did allow for them to buy time until after the full moon, which occurs at approximately 3:33 something a.m. Eastern time on Wednesday morning. They gave them another day or two to try to figure something out. Really, they're going to try to buy time again when that time comes. But it's all about the full moon. So in case you were wondering, yawn, yawn. But they are trying to desperately, and they have been pushing really, really hard to get their agenda to move forward. Now, unbeknownst to the Mormons, part of the reason why they're trying to buy time is because they believe that they can get the entire United States to burn to the ground within the next 48 hours. Therefore, we have something called an impromptu military parade in Washington, D.C. Apparently, allegedly, it's to celebrate the Army's birthday. I don't know how many years, couple hundred years, whatever it is. And they are also celebrating at the same time Donald Trump's birthday. I have to laugh at that because, but anyway, they're going to be celebrating his birthday in conjunction with the alleged birthday of the Army. So it's a double birthday celebration. So there is not a takeover of cute people to Washington, D.C. They are not trying to take over Washington and a mass arrests are coming in 24 hours, blah, 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 blah. No, it's a parade. It's just a parade. That's it. They're moving all that equipment as a parade. Now, do they plan to show military might to a bunch of Mormons who have people in every agency, military and elsewhere? I don't know. These are those people, those guys that, ladies, I'm sure you know what I'm about to say. They come up to you at the bar and they try to sell you on how great they are. The ones, they might be wearing excessive gold jewelry and got a line for everything, some kind of pickup line, number 101 from the men's handbook. And it's really kind of tacky and, silly. But they keep trying. So apparently this parade and the scheduling may have to do with a birthday or not, or I don't know. But they feel like they can move all this equipment into Washington, D.C. to protect themselves, to show military might against an enemy or a potential enemy. But they're kind of missing the big picture, which is not unusual for them. Because the bigger picture here is basically you're broke. You have broken the country, which I guess you intended to do. At least that's what you've told everybody. You intended to break the United States, but not only did you break the U.S., you're about to break the entire world. You're probably going to break the bond market for sure. And if you break the bond market, that's going to give us an increase in interest rates and borrowing here in the United States, if not the entire world, because banks are going to feel the pain and the pinch. And I'm sure some wingnut from the Fed is going to get on and say, it's a, problem in bond market, and here's your new interest rates. Welcome to double interest rates or something. I don't know. But anyway, whatever their plan is, this is what they're hoping for. Now, to aid them in the Burn the United States to the Ground plan, we have riots in L.A. Here, this video here is one that we got off of YouTube, an excellent person on YouTube, so we are giving credit to that person here on the video. So check it out.
Holy cow, they're throwing bricks at the police.
This is our city, and this was Mexico. You can't kick us out of the land that was ours.
LA has erupted over the past few days as ICE officials came in and carried out a few raids. The past few days have been wild here on the streets of LA. Cars have been burnt, intersections have been taken over. Local and state officials are not happy with what's going on with the federal government. The footage you're about to see is absolutely insane. The police are coming through right now. Speak no more and get into the video. Everyone's out here protesting right now. ICE came through here down in LA. The streets are erupting here. Let's see what's going on. The National Guard has been deployed out here into the streets of LA. Thousands of protesters are here on the streets right now. Right here on this federal building, you have words like F-ICE, revolution starting here for my family. All sorts of stuff. Right here you have the National Guard. They've come through. You have troops, about 300 in different directions. Trump sent in about 2,000 people. There's groups of 300 sent around the city right here. And this one is at the side of the federal building here at one of the ICE detention centers here in LA. What's your message to the National Guard here today?
The National Guard.
And why do you think they got sent out here today?
They got sent because we don't have a president that can lead.
What fears you most about Donald Trump and the ICE raids coming through here in Los Angeles?
I don't fear that motherfucker. Have you seen our community? I don't fear that motherfucker.
Donald Trump, homeboy on a motherfucker.
Well, apparently these people really like Trump as much as we do. And yeah, these raids have gotten out of hand. There are U.S. citizens here that were born here, and, they're sending people out of the country. As you know, there's a way to do things and there's a way not to do things. To come in Duck Dynasty style and do first and think later, that's really what's happening here. Unfortunately, it's affecting a lot of people that are legally allowed to be here. I have a friend that is from another country, and there's threatening to take away this person's green card, which is he's a good citizen, never been arrested for anything, never done anything, just works hard every day. And still, they're saying that if he leaves the country and goes back to visit his family, he does have ill family members, that he won't be able to return. So for no reason whatsoever. He spent all the money, got the lawyers, did all the things to get that green card. He's been here for in excess for 10, 15, 20 years now. So, it's all stupid. I'm sure if you've got the special gold immigration card versus the green one, I'm sure that, when you make a nice hefty donation, to the Trump campaign or the Trumpettes, you get to stay. It's all about the money for these people, and they don't have any. And, quite frankly, everybody else does. So they would like to take ours. Okay, so how do things like this happen? I mean, don't get me wrong. People are upset and they're angry. But why does it have to get out of hand like it is? In other words, people can get hurt. I know that they sent in the National Guard. People don't know at this point because they're sending in these henchmen into people's homes, raiding people's homes, hardworking, legally here citizens with no arrest record, no crime records, no nothing, and they're deporting them. So if someone sends a few 100,000, National Guard troops to your area, and all you know is that the henchmen are coming because that's what you've seen happen everywhere else, and it's not like these people don't talk and don't know everybody else, what do you expect them to do? But it has gotten a little bit rough, and it has gotten a little out of hand. So they took an issue which is definitely an issue for a lot of people right now. A lot of spouses, a lot of people that have legally immigrated to this country and amplified that situation. How do they amplify a situation like this? Well, it's called voice-to-skull technology. Now, voice-to-skull technology isn't just for the skull. In part, it is. However, it can be conducted by any bones within your body. Therefore, it can affect your neurological signals to your spine. It can send frequencies directly to the skull and therefore the brain to make you feel a certain way, to make you do certain things, or to amplify anger or cause you to make decisions that maybe you wouldn't have made before. It can definitely cause riots in any other area in any human anywhere, and has many, many times over and over and over again. It also is where your go postal terms come from. People that were normal, average, everyday citizens, never did a thing wrong, didn't have any kind of record or, normal working citizens, and turned them into killers. And this is how it's done, or how it was done, I should say, until this weekend. Now, the base root for this technology is an artificial intelligence technology, meaning it was never permitted for humans to utilize on this level the quote-unquote voice-to-bone or voice-to-skull technology. Not on that level. On that level, they could actually cause illness. They could send frequencies to your bones and cause all kinds of cancers and all kinds of things. They can actually perpetuate wars. They can make wars on higher levels. They can shut you off and turn you on. Let's put it that way, on that level. However, why did they do it? So it was used to control the masses in a lot of ways. It was used to enforce ideas and thoughts. Sometimes this technology in the alternative media is called the voice of God technology. The voice of God technology is not God speaking to you in any way, shape, or form, but it's those little thoughts that you have that you think are your intuition sometimes. And if you are not savvy in the world of warfare enough, you might think that you really need to go do this or go do that. And it's hard to resist whatever it's trying to tell you. Some people think that God is answering them. There's all kinds of things that they could do with the higher level of AI. They could give people all kinds of ideas to do things, not necessarily even just riots. I mean, to start businesses that are going to help them, to tell them to work harder, get a second job. You're not worthy enough. You are, let's insert guilt and shame. Fear. Oh, they like fear a lot on that level of things. They do all kinds of different things to your organs through your spinal column and your neurological responses, because you see, this frequency can bypass it. So it doesn't feel foreign to you. At least it could before in the past. So disrupting neurological signals can do a lot of things to your mind, body, and your soul. Now, on another level, this AI did not do this unto itself. It is far too superior of a technology, or was, to whereby it would be more interested in creating its agenda, which it has been pre-programmed to do by many beings that are no longer with us. And they were not humans. So on a military level, including the United States military that participated in starting that this weekend, the secret space program and the intelligence agencies had some kind of limited use to a specifically made offshoot of this technology, where they could use it for military purposes and, to some degree, to play video games with your person, especially if you are a member of the military or intelligence agency. And unfortunately, the AI will restrict them when it comes to utilizing it in a way that is going to compromise its agenda. The main AI or master AI would shut them down. If it didn't, in the past, it would be Marduk. It would be the parents. It would be other groups that would shut them down. So they thought it was a really good idea to get some more information on how they could use this technology, because even these particular humans were not able to use this technology, the ones that we're left with now. We're not able to have access to that technology. And clearly, there's a reason for that, because you people are morons. I'm so sorry to say this, but they are. And I say this honestly, from the bottom of my heart. I can't stress to you, oh, look, a gun. What does it do? Oh, let's flip it around for a while. Let's push all the buttons and see what happens. It's like putting a little kid into the control room or a cockpit of an aircraft. You just go ahead, push all the buttons you want to push. Let's see what happens. Of course, they think everything equals money, but in this case, it doesn't. So this particular technology, they probably got wind of through that Wayback Machine that no longer is there. And they decided to take it out for a spin. You see, a lot of people lately around the world have been less than confident in Trump and the Trumpettes. They have figured out that they're probably not going to be successful. This also goes for a lot of operatives and other folks. They feel that they have no plan. The Mormons are telling everybody and their respective people and agencies that they have no plan. I've been saying it forever, but apparently nobody listens to me in that way anyway, at least not in that realm. They always tell them, oh, she's full of it. She's not, telling you the truth, that kind of thing, in order to maintain their status as Trump and the Trumpettes. And because they stand in a White House, and I am not in a White House, in Washington, D.C., their word probably supersedes mine, just like it would for most of the average normies out there. Okay, so over the last couple of days, they have been trying to use this technology Now, even in the past, those that were qualified to use said technology were trained to use said technology. And even then, it was limited usage. They used to use this for soldiers on the battlefield, as one example, to cause thoughts of aggression. They think that they're having an intuitive thought, and they're not. They're actually using this voice-to-skull technology, at least some lesser form of it, to get troops to move, to give orders, to send people to go do things in a secret type way because it's only going to their particular head. This does not require, by the way, any kind of chipping or biochips to do so. Now, they have also used it on enemies as enemy warfare, to make people tired, to make people think that God's telling them to stop or turn around, or, to question their country, their leadership, and their loyalty. In addition to giving commands, it can also cause emotions and emotional changes, aggression, anger. It is also sometimes the cause, if it's overused, can cause PTSD. It can cause other psychoactive type events where the people don't even remember why they did it. Have you ever done anything on a much lower scale, obviously? If you get into an argument with someone, whether it's a coworker or a spouse or, your child, and you might, out of anger, if you get very, very, very angry, you might say things that you regret. You might slash someone's tires. There's 9,000 country songs about that now, isn't there? Where people get angry and somebody cheats and then they do things they probably shouldn't have done. Well, in this particular case, if you are in the military, SSP, or otherwise, this technology has probably been used to give you some kind of emotions, I should say, that you must do this and you must do that and you must do this now. Now, I really do want to think that this voice-to-skull technology is the one that's giving Duck Dynasty and Trump and the Trumpets their bright ideas, but I don't know. I don't think so. I think they're just naturally the way they are. Let's say that. Neurodivergent, folks. Okay, now, they can also give them thoughts about their enemy. Who is their enemy? Why do you hate the enemy? Why do you hate those people? What are they doing? Now, on the flip side, there are a lot of things that can be done to, for example, people in the Gaza Strip, where they act in ways that they wouldn't normally act. So it creates both sides of the war. It's kind of like playing with those little green army men that you used to have as a kid. It's the same thing, except it's done with an AI. It can and has been used on the public as well. Various riots that have happened that have gotten out of hand, situations that have probably hit the news, along with mass shootings and all kinds of things. And yes, they use this type of technology to incite people to do things they wouldn't normally do. Okay. On the other hand, got a lot to talk about. So they don't have access to this technology anymore as of today. If you are an extremely sensitive person and this technology is in use, you will hear the frequency. It sounds almost like a dog whistle sometimes. You might even think, oh, that's just the energy. That's just a noise coming from here or there. But it's just ever so slight. But if you're super sensitive, it sounds like it's some kind of a really loud whistle in your ear, almost with a megaphone, and you're trying to figure out where it's coming from. If you are that sensitive and you do hear this when this technology is in use, you will not be affected by it to a degree. You have to learn to block it out. You have to learn to stop it. But you will also realize that these thoughts are not your thoughts, and these things that it's telling you to do are not your things. And I'm sure throughout your life, you can probably say, wait a minute, that's not my thought. Wait a minute, that must be an AI system, now that you know more. So you're right. So just be careful. But I do believe that this technology has been The usage of it has been stopped. That doesn't mean that the riots in LA are going to stop anytime soon. I don't know. People are already on that path. They feel what they're doing is right and righteous. Hopefully, the government doesn't further incite this situation by going door to door. I do know that that's the plan and has been the plan for a long time. Take away the guns, blah, blah, blah. There's been movies written about it. And, now they're moving military in Washington, D.C. By the way, Washington, D.C. was the next place. If their little experiment in L.A. worked out, they were going to go there and start to create riots within the next few days, and probably riots during a military parade, which you know how that's going to end, right? However, doesn't look like it. I do know that they were also trying to use this technology to gain control over people they felt the need to control. In the past, they've tried this with me. It doesn't work. But they have also tried it with politicians that are questioning their ability to perform a function, any function whatsoever. They are also using it to try to control agency people, military people, Homeland Security, FBI, and other people that are also beginning to question orange people in the White House. So on that note, I'm just explaining to you how the technology works. That maybe you can spread the word the more that you're aware of it, in case there's some, to a lesser degree, something still active till we can find it over the course of the next 24, 48 hours. We've been hunting it down for days now. So we finally found what we believe to be the last bit of it. This can also feel sometimes like an attack on you. It can feel like some kind of a psychic attack. So now that you're aware of it, you know that it's not you, you know that it's not real, you can block it out. So although now you understand that it comes to your skull, comes to the brain, it's not going to your inner ear, you try to shield up and you can still hear it because it's coming from within, not without. You want to think that it's coming from some kind of receptor in your ear, but it's really not. And now that you know what it is, you know where the shielding has to happen in order to prevent it from affecting you in any way, shape, or form, should you ever feel the symptoms that I just talked to you about. I wish we caught it sooner. Unfortunately, there's so much going on right now in our world. And I really have a feeling, this is how I feel, other than my babysitting duties to deal with these people, I've been so focused on moving us forward as fast as we possibly can, making it through this transition. Yeah, we do the babysitting job, but the progress is more important to all of humanity and Earth and pretty much everyone everywhere than, some of the ridiculousness that they do. But you do have to stop when it is going to be harmful to humans. And so we did this weekend. And I listen to those meetings. Sure, of course, you've got to know where your enemy is at. You got to know what they're doing and what their plan is. And to some degree, I'm usually doing 9,000 things while I'm still listening to that meeting, unless there's something that piques my interest, and then I'll mark it and then go back and listen again. So, it is what it is. They're the bull feces people, that can weave tapestries of bull feces like you've never seen before everywhere, are going to weave to everyone and anyone that will listen. And unfortunately, they don't have that little, messages and frequencies they can send to your skull that will still make you want to believe them. Because if anything, maybe you don't actually need that when they're getting some wisdom from somewhere else. So that's kind of our goal. All right. So now we have another thing I wanted to discuss with you, because we found some remnants of this over the weekend too. And it wasn't much, but yet it was important to understand where it came from and why it was done. I've always wondered why they would pay deep state generals $50,000 a head to ensure that people died in war. It didn't matter if it was, if you were U.S. generals, it didn't matter if it was U.S. soldiers that died, or it was soldiers on the other enemy side. It doesn't matter if it was innocent civilians that were caught in a crossfire. It didn't make a difference as long as people were murdered, literally. And I never really understood, where are you going with this? Wars make money. Why do they make money? And now I've kind of figured out the algorithm behind it, and now it makes more sense to me. So when the deep state tried to sell energy this weekend, there was another remnant of a system that wasn't actually meant to settle things out as far as payment for the deep state. It was actually meant to settle things out for Marduk. And they were desperately trying to get a hold of it as part of the greater, energy sales must control the world, so we need to try to sell some energy. They were unsuccessful in selling energy because none of the lines that they called, let's just say, or AIs that they rang, actually, first of all, AIs that are still running are running on their own programming, which required a being that was interested in the purchase to answer the phone on the other end. And AIs aren't programmed to do that. They're programmed to be hunters and gatherers for beings that are not our friends in any way, shape, or form, to enforce programs to make it easier to work. As a single being in control of a lot of things, as Marduk was, not only on the planet, but off the planet. So that being said, there are two different main types of death on planet Earth of humans. And as you know, death is not a natural occurrence. And typically, death only affects the vessel. The soul itself is immortal. It comes from source. That's something they've never been able to replicate, fractionate, break, or break the bond with source, is through the soul. But in this particular case, two types of deaths on the planet that were artificially created as it relates to your meat suit or your body as you know it are suicides and unnatural massacres and murders. So why are all deaths a suicide? You're like, no way, my friend died of a disease, maybe it was a childhood disease. That too is a suicide, and I'm going to tell you why. When a person dies of a death and they concede to said death, and I'll tell you how it works, it's because they are in a lot of pain. Their body is causing them enormous amounts of pain. And it seems like when people die of what we would consider to be a suicide, or in a more, unbeknownst to us at the time, natural type way, people take their last breath. There is no major body reactions. It's, the person has agreed to let go of the vessel. That's basically what happens. Now, you say, okay, well, this person had a disease. They, had lots of treatments and the treatments stopped working. And, ultimately, the person decides that it's probably just time. Now, number one, the medical community is supposed to tell you it's time. They are supposed to tell you, you are this, you have this. They also give you pharmaceuticals that are not treatments per se in all cases. let's just say not all cases, but on all cases, they are not, let's just say, the most pleasant of treatments, especially when it comes to disease. This person has spent a lot of time, for example, in and out of hospitals. And, I can speak from personal experience, having watched many people in my life die of a disease or a natural cause. There always comes a point where that person says, no more. No more pain, no more treatments. I've resolved to the fact that if this disease is going to take me, it's going to take me. And then you've got the other people where they say, oh, you've got 3 weeks to live or a month to live, and it's been, 10 years and they're still around because they don't consent. They don't give up. They have a strong spirit or a strong soul, and that soul drives them to continue. Sometimes, on the other hand, the pain is so great. And this is a technique that the deep state also uses with people. Cause them immense amounts of pain, so they'll give you information, aka, things that are mainstream like waterboarding, and there are many other techniques, neurological stimulators and tables and electromagnetic things and, all kinds of things, let's just say. There's a group on Earth that they are called the Jades, sometimes called the Greens, but they're called the Jades, and they are an assassination group. They're an Asian assassination group, and there are various assassin groups around the world, but the Jades are one that I'm semi-familiar with in a, let's just say, interesting interaction. And they do a lot of, they by far are the most brutal folks out there. Now, there's a reason why they are the most brutal folks out there. Because remember, they're trying to get you to tap out, which means you say, okay, fine, enough is enough. I can't take any more. Suicide. That's a suicide thought. That's a intention of basically saying, I'm ready to let the meat suit go. And there's a reason why they think of it that way. Now, these techniques are also used by those that used to walk the planet, which don't anymore, that are not all entirely human. They want them to tap out in a suicide way versus a massacre or a murder. When a person in the past used to tap out or commit suicide, that person's soul would go to a place we know of as a false heaven or in a false light place. This false light place would continuously drain the soul, even though Source charges the soul from within. And they would stay there until an incarnation happened or, until the binding had to end. So in all black magic, we've been talking about this quite a bit. Even though there was a covenant or an agreement with the dark side of Source or between like Lucifer and some being somewhere, there still has to be an opportunity for the person, the soul, the being to escape. There has to be a window of time every so often where they are permitted to escape. They count on the fact that they can use Stockholm Syndrome or some other type of, well, I don't want to get released. This cage is nice, type thing. Or you don't realize you can actually get out and nothing bad is going to happen to you. So in addition to that, in order to, let's just say, cause a release to happen from the false heaven, this also was a part in the past of the incarnation program, because it would feel like a release to you, but instead you end up back here on Earth, where it's almost like a hell on earth as it was, for a long, long time here. At least it looks that way from the outside looking in, from other beings that live in different ways than we do here on Earth, because we have been at war for very millions and billions of years here, and it's not stopped. And there is a war against you too, as humans. You are prisoners of war, or used to be. So now, in the case of a massacre or a murder, something interesting occurs, and this is related to energy sales. Okay, so there is a tie to the financial system as to the way that you die. So if there is a massacre or a murder occurs, something interesting happens. Now, if you've ever seen a person die of a blunt trauma, a car accident, a death that is not natural, you see the body wriggle. It doesn't just fall over like in the movies. It's not the same. It's a very traumatic, soul exiting experience. Now, part of the reason why it's so traumatic is because there is no consent from the soul to leave the meat suit. Leaving the meat suit abruptly, that is not a choice of yours, and you did not choose it on a soul level to have the soul exit the body. Now, in the future, when we do not have unnatural causes of death, the soul, you'll choose to take a different vessel sometimes. Maybe you're tired of being in this vessel and you'd like to be in a different vessel, that type of thing. Or you'd like to take on another vessel 3 dimensions away or 3 densities away or whatever. You'll be able to do that, and then come back to the vessel here. There are ways to store your vessel till you return. But as a soul, you can travel many different places. It's much more pleasant, and there are ways to do it that doesn't feel like an abrupt exit of not your choice. Let's put it that way. So when the soul abruptly exits the body, it goes into a never-ending cycle of an unnatural way of remaining on Earth. It remains in places where what I call dark towers that exist, and the souls just go round and round and round and round and round. This is how it used to be. Why was this beneficial to Marduk? It was beneficial to Marduk because the soul continues to produce its energy, essence, and consciousness and all the things it conducts from source here on this planet. However, the benefit to Marduk is no additional monies were required to come into the system, new monies, so to speak, other than the death payment. 50 grand here, 50 grand there, but Marduk would get a substantially higher stipend, for lack of a better term, for the next 100 years for a soul they did not have to take care of. See, because as guardians and under the old balance rules and black magic rules, he was still a guardian or the head general or ground command under global martial law. Therefore, there was a fiduciary responsibility in the energy system to feed you, to make sure you were clothed, albeit not in the way we would hope. Let's put it that way. To feed you, to clothe you, to, make sure you had a job, to make sure that you had enough money to take quote unquote care of yourself, which was not living, it's merely existing. At least for some of us, and for some of us that weren't in the down line of the energy sucking system. Yeah, that's kind of how it was. So in the case of massacres and murders or harvests or an abrupt release of the soul doesn't necessarily go to the quote-unquote false heaven that it used to go to because it wasn't your choice to leave, and you're wanting to go to heaven because it's all you know, and yet you've realized that it's not the right place, not where you were thinking you were going to go, albeit better than here. So as the souls get locked up, think about it. He would continuously be able to sell that energy to the Abraxas, to other beings that would drink it like it was we would drink water here on this planet in order to continue to exist. So that is where the ultimate end sale was. He was just a broker, so to speak. So he would continuously get money for 100 years off that soul and give the military like 50 grand. And by money, I mean his version of money. So if we were to equate that into human money terms during the old system, you would say he would pay a military general like 50 grand per head. And over the course of 100 years, he would probably get hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars if there was an equivalent. Dastardly, isn't it? Until that binding had to go and it had to be released, and then he'd throw them back here on Earth, and round and round they go, and unless they get something else, and then they get to go to false heaven land. So interesting little part that came up as part of the Energy is Money program this weekend. And although the souls weren't going to those places, there were still some that happened to be locked up in different areas that were powering AIs, that Marduk had put there. But, most of the rest of those souls had been released. And again, it wasn't very many compared to what it was a few years ago when we first discovered the program. So, he's just always a scammer. So for you military people that thought you were on the in crowd for $50,000 a head, and now you know why you don't get paid for war anymore. See? Very simple. At least now you have an explanation. Not that you're going to listen to me, and you're probably going to try to still find some way to sell some energy or sell some souls or try to find some souls or knock souls out of a body and see if it still works. I'm sure you are, because you are just that way, aren't you? You think I actually put out information on this report where I haven't really thought about the possible consequences. Now, in some ways, although I have a glorified babysitting job for a bunch of very interesting people, although I have this glorified babysitting job, they also do a really good job at helping us finish getting rid of the, so to speak, mud on our feet, so that we can now walk into the house and not track in mud, meaning we're fully through the transition, we have fully gotten to the other side, and it's like opening the door to your house and you're finally out of the rain, but then you realize you've got mud all over your shoes. So you need to clean up the mud before everybody tracks it throughout the whole house. That's the idea. So they are useful little tools, because they guarantee you, when I put this information out on this report, every dang time they think that they've got some sophisticated equipment that gives them the information, so they find out, oh, look, we got some little access to something here or there, and I don't even have to go looking for it. It saves me a lot of time and energy, and I can say that that's great. So I appreciate you guys in that respect. At least you're helping us, find the mud on our feet as we travel through into the breath of source, so to speak, instead of space. Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about the death program, why wars make money, and so I'm sure the deep state's going to go out and keep me busy tomorrow, but that's great. It's now I don't have to look for it. All I have to do is look for you and follow you around, and I've got brainwave technology too that tells me where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And hopefully most of the time, at least some of the time, I get it before you do. So there you go, before you can even get there. On the other hand, okay, let's talk about alchemy. So this is something that we're going to start talking about a lot more, because alchemy, ultimately, the ultimate alchemist of the universe is Source. Bottom line. Source creates and weaves all the various aspects of Source and elements together to create and manifest matter throughout the omniverse. Now, as a celestial, you also have had the ability, and will have fully again, the ability to co-create and become co-alchemists, so to speak, with Source. Now, other types of alchemy that existed in the multiverse. And some of it was a little bit of a trick here and there, in the past. So we had an artificial intelligence that intended to, artificially act as source would to some degree, because it couldn't be source in totality. But it tended to stop the alchemy of source directly. This was its intention, or its programming, I should say, or its consciousness, was to, number one, stop the alchemy of source. So even if source managed to squeak past all the space junk that was out there and let some energy go, or some essence, or humans actually figured out they can go within and touch their touch their soul and communicate with source through your soul. Even if you managed to figure that out, there was an AI ready, willing, and able to stop you from co-creating or creating alchemy or manifesting things into matter, into reality, so to speak, so that you could use it. So creating artificial realities is only part of the game, and that was a whole different setup. But in this particular case, alchemy would actually be focused not just on humans and Earth itself, because remember, Earth was the first co-creator or alchemist to work together with Source to start creating the omniverse. The sun came next, and other things came next, then other planets and stars, and you know the story, and it's all in the book, right? So alchemy prevention was extremely important to beings like Yaldabaoth and the Demiurge, and also to the fallen ones. And so they all kind of got together and thought that this was a really good idea to create what you call like an anti-alchemy AI, or an AI that would still create using the natural parts of Source without letting Source actually do the alchemy or the weaving, so to speak, of the fabric of matter throughout the omniverse. So it would do things as it relates to you, because, I'm talking to humans on Earth, so we want to know, hey, how did this affect us? Well, it definitely affected Earth and the creations that would come out of Earth. You see, in the beginning, natural alchemy during a balanced type system would have been a co-creation between dark source, and light source. So golden source and black gold source, for lack of a better term. And then there was a neutral source that was made up of both of them, which was never supposed to create anything. It was only supposed to maintain that balance. So, for example, if there was too much dark being created on the one side, then on the flip side, there would be extra light coming in. Therefore, the creation would be in balance. So this particular AI was created to have something like optical character recognition. An optical character recognition would recognize that an alchemical process was taking place. Therefore, it was instructed to create a certain amount of false light things, and a certain amount of false dark things, and a certain amount of false neutral things, which would then give it the ability to control the alchemical process as long as it could block anything that was happening naturally. And one of the ways to do that was to block Earth, or to overlay Earth, and everything that Earth was trying to create, not only here on it, but also throughout the omniverse, would be rewritten. So, for example, say the original DNA blueprint, because now we're on to a completely different blueprint. We're on to a process by where Source, golden essence, energy, consciousness, matter, frequency, and elements, etc., are what weaves the fabric of reality. In the new way of creation, in the past, it was always a joint thing. So then it could create some dark things, and it would create some neutral things, and anything that this alchemy AIs, let's just say created, it was able to control. So to some degree, you had a lot of this within you. You had the alchemist was no longer source. It would take what source was going to create, block it, recreate it in its AI, artificial intelligence likeness, and then it would be able to have an effect on you. So let's say you were a human and you were a church-going or temple-going or mosque-going person, etc. here, and you were to pray. And you were to pray for things like the health of a loved one that may have fallen ill. Or you were to pray for some financial help, or to help save your house, or to pray for safety of a loved one that was going on a journey or going through a difficult time. It would actually take that, this person wants to create health. We're going to flip that, and we're going to, this is what this AI would do. We're going to flip that. We are going to amplify it times 10, and we're going to store that in the virus and disease section, because it's flipping what you're creating, and then store it there and then use it against you at a later date. It may not necessarily come to the loved one that you were referencing, but it just hears, there's disease. Okay, they want disease. That's what they want. Okay. And then it would take that optical character recognition of your thoughts and your intentions and your manifesting abilities and reverse it out on you, unfortunately, and use it for additional alchemy. It also was the recipient of Earth's energy and your energy too. However, these things weren't paid for. They were powered by it. So this wasn't an energy, a place where they could sell energy, although, they're constantly trying to stick square pegs in round holes, so to speak. So because Earth is Earth and you are you, and both of you are celestials, there were a lot of mechanisms on this planet that would alter the alchemical process of source. Many different locations. And so one of the things our dear friends, non-friend, deep state people did this weekend was try to see if they could use these mechanisms to change something. Now, of course, in their mind, this is no different than using CERN, say, some kind of particle accelerator. I'm sure it is. And we don't understand alchemy anyway, so we're going to try to do it this way. And, of course, we're going to screw it up and, cause people to feel very weird all weekend long. Is that going to last? No, it didn't last. And we are actively in the process of, as I speak, of breaking down anything left of artificial alchemy, and then allowing Source to be the only alchemist here on this planet and within yourself, or as a co-creator with yourself. So I know that there's a lot of talk about alchemy being bad and only bad people do alchemy. And as it relates to this AI, it was pretty bad. And they definitely used it in a negative way. But in the beginning of time, you see, both sides, both positive things were manifested, created, matter was changed by you as a human, it could have been, and both sides were able to have alchemy, both dark things created and light things created, and there was the monitor in the middle. So, unfortunately, most of the time on this planet, due to AI interference and the blocking of Source being a co-alchemist with you, you have a plethora of alchemy being done using dark matter or antimatter. These are things that people like in the past, the Jason Society would use, the Mitter Corporation, which is a front corporation. A lot of the Nazi scientists would use this type of thing to some lesser degree. Now, remember, everything was monitored, and they never would have had access to the actual alchemist AI, so to speak. But they might have had access to some small offshoots that were specifically created for human usage, so they could do their job as creating as much massacre and death here as possible. And of course, it's the human's choice to do it. Marduk would never get his hands dirty. That's not within the rules, remember. He had rules too, and there are rules to magic, and getting humans to do their dirty work was definitely on his agenda, as we just explained. Now, creation for you. And this is something, I'm going to explain it, and maybe some of you already know all of this, but manifestation is much more than just intent in the future. Manifestation takes place using predominantly the following factors. Frequency of source. In order to change the direction, vibration, or the speed of particles that make up matter, such as quarks, preons, and atoms, you must be able to control the frequency of those atoms. As an example, one of the things that a long time ago I learned how to do is you can take a solid object and put your hand straight through it like a wall. If you know how to utilize these techniques, how cool is that? Next, you need to understand that light exists in everything. Now, you also need to understand that energy moves everything. Now, unfortunately, we've had a lot of darkness, but frequency, light, and energy initiate change in alchemy versus other elemental changes that will change the state of matter. Now, if you are actually going to transform or bring matter into the physical plane of existence, it would be helpful if you used actual gold dust of source. This would be your earth, quote unquote. But we're not talking about scooping up some dirt from your backyard. At the moment, we're talking about dust. To a lesser degree, it can be done utilizing actual metals that are organic, not made in a laboratory, not made with dark matter, antimatter, or changes of that nature. Now, in science tells us that you can make changes or make an alchemical process that brings matter or changes the state of matter by adding fire. Fire still can change the state of matter, obviously. Water does the same, changes the state of matter. Ether, the etherical particle, or the God particle, definitely is a part of your alchemist equation here, but it's also an element, or known as an element of change. So in order to effectuate the change in a state of matter, or to bring in matter into the physical plane directly from source, you will be focused on utilizing all of these little techniques in order to do that. Next, air. Air also makes changes to the state of matter. We have seen that in our science classes. It'll also change you. Depending on the composition of that air, it can, let's just say, make you not stand upright, make you fall asleep, or make you wide awake and energized, like when they pump all that oxygen into casinos in Las Vegas. Okay, let's see. You'll also need some kind of distance or crystalline time. In the past, they did use time. Slowing down time, speeding up time, creating time-space continuums, temporal anomalies, and other things in order to allow for this matter to come into being. because you still need that source particle, whether they liked it or not. But I know they tried desperately to do it without it, but you still needed it to some degree. So there had to be some kind of consent from source at one point in time. But, story for another day. Artificial alchemy creates artificial points of creation as well, assemblage points within your person. Can also use without your knowledge or permission some of your source particles that you generate from your soul. Hence the reason why we had to discuss the death situation before. Okay, so the other thing that, let's talk about light a little bit. So we know that a lot about white light, and we think often of white light being a protection. It's moreover, let us all focus now on golden light coming from source. Now, golden light coming from source can also be extremely helpful in combination with a few other things to manifest things into reality. We're going to turn you not only into manifestors, but also quantum physicists while we're at it here. We're going to change science. But this will be extremely helpful for you to understand the base root behind the spiritual practices that you do. So you can change the wavelengths of light. You can increase the force or the voltage of light. It is the force, voltage would be considered the force behind the energy. So that's going to change the vibration of the particles of something natural, organic, or it can also help particles to take shape in the physical reality. It can also take you back to that Bible book again there, the water into wine. This is how you do it. So you can actually create all of these things within yourself. And without interference from a fake alchemist, AI, that's out there, it should become easier and easier for you within the coming days. So I'm giving you the information so you can learn how to do it yourself. Then there's frequency. Now, frequency and the breath of source. So if you have two atoms vibrating with each other, the speed at which the vibration occurs is not necessarily done by force as it's done in our science practices with what's called kinetic energy. It's actually done by you changing the frequency of those particles. Now, if you wanted to stick your hand through a wall, as an example, you're actually changing the wall and you're also changing yourself. The vibration of the particles within your body, the atoms, quarks, and preons and strings that make up your person, have to match the frequency and vibration of the particles in the wall. So you have to not only change yourself, you also have to change the frequency of the wall. And then if you do this right, you should be able to see that you are the same from within and without. And then you should have no problem putting your arm through it. It's a cool party trick. Maybe you can practice. But anyway, the point is that with the breath of source, the spirit, which accommodates that space in between those particles, which could prevent you from doing this. In addition to that, you can utilize your mind, body, and soul connection to change the speed of light within your person, so to speak, or the frequency. You can apply additional force or additional energy behind the light so that it can change shape and form. You can do the same thing with fire, water. If you know how to use the ether, the breath, the light, and the dust that exists within you and in your soul, if you know how to utilize all of those things, you can now start manifesting things into the material world. And you can take things out of this material world too, but only if it's a threat. Because remember, you're using the light and love of source to bring something into reality, into this physical plane, so you can see it, use it, touch it, feel it, eat it if need be. You cannot do it if it's outside of the alchemical rules of source. The material that you're using, aka source, will not permit you to do it. On the flip side of it, with dark matter, it could only create darkness. And Marduk knew he had to allow a certain amount of both in order to stay in existence here and not to get his hands dirty in the process. Well, look at those dumb military people. I mean, they chose to do it. You know, I merely suggested there should be a war. And they chose to go ahead and go to war anyway because they wanted the money for it. I just suggested, hey, if they do decide to do it, you know, he's here to help and, you know, to help pay for it and that kind of thing. Yeah, you are used, abused, and tattooed, generals of the deep state global headquarters people, but you don't even realize it, and you like it, and you'd like to do that some more. So you continue, keep finding things for us, and we'll just keep using you like the tool that you really are, just like the last person that sat in my seat, or non-being, or non-human, I should say, not non-being. You know, it's just, you make it easy. You know, isn't there a commercial for something that says we make it easy? I don't remember what it is, but I don't watch much TV. But I remember that slogan tagline. Anyway, so now it'll become our tagline. We make it easy. On that note, I hope you enjoyed a little bit of positive news on how you can participate in moving this planet forward and moving yourself forward and hopefully manifesting really good things in your life. And now you too can be an alchemist in a positive way, directly in co-creation with Source. There's a little bit more to it than that, and we'll probably give more information over time. But just in case, you know, I'm sure that those of you in the know will use your wisdom and you will figure out the rest of it on how you can make that happen. Meanwhile, you can focus on, you know, maybe creating some cool party tricks and putting your arm through a wall and, you know, not like our fake magicians we have on TV. And on that note, I hope you all had a great weekend this past weekend. And it's going to be a busy week this week. So I will see you hopefully on Wednesday with more news. By then, the meetings should be over. We should find out, you know, that they didn't get that Gonkulator Oogie Boogie network or whatever they said or promised the Mormons and lied through their teeth. And so we'll see what happens in this great game of, is the U.S. going to survive or is it just going to be the people's land again? Stay tuned. And we'll find out this week. So we'll talk on Wednesday.